Step out of the vehicle now.
Officer Vance Harlow's voice sliced through the night air like a serrated blade. To them, his military haircut meant nothing. His calm demeanor, a mask hiding danger beneath dark skin. "Where'd you get this vehicle, son?" Harlow asked, flashlight beam scanning the pristine interior. "This is my car, sir. Purchased it last month," he replied, voice steady, patience worn thin.
"Don't get smart with me, boy," Officer Mercer spat. "People like you don't drive cars like this."
Without warning, they yanked him from the driver's seat, slammed him against hot metal. Cuffs bit into wrists, phones recorded, nobody intervened. They thought they were teaching him respect. Instead, they were digging their own professional graves. Because he wasn't just any black man in a nice car, he was Colonel Xavier Rhodes, Deputy Director of Pentagon Intelligence Operations. Now he sat in the patrol car. No rage, no pleas, just calculating precision, letting consequences build. What happens when small-town officers realize who they've detained? How will these officers react when they discover they've handcuffed a decorated military intelligence officer? Will their desperate backpedaling save anything? And what price will they and their department ultimately pay? Let's follow this story to find the answers. The suburban streets of Ridgemont Heights glowed under amber streetlights, creating pockets of warm illumination against the darkness of a Friday night. Traffic moved steadily on Oakwood Avenue, the main artery connecting the affluent northeastern neighborhoods to downtown. The air carried the scent of fresh rain on asphalt, lingering from an afternoon shower that had left everything with a glossy sheen under the streetlights. Patrol Car 22 idled at the corner of Oakwood and Pine, a black and white Sentinel with Ridgemont Heights Police Department emblazoned on its side. Inside sat Officers Vance Harlow and Kent Mercer, veterans of the force with 15 and 12 years respectively. Harlow, the senior officer, scrolled through the MDT while Mercer scanned the passing vehicles with practiced scrutiny. The clock on their dashboard read 10:27 p.m. "Quiet night," Mercer commented, taking a sip from his coffee cup. At 43, he was stocky and square-jawed with thinning blonde hair and permanently furrowed brows that gave him a perpetual look of suspicion. "Too quiet," Harlow replied. Older at 51, he had close-cropped gray hair and the weathered face of someone who'd spent decades working outdoors. "Let's circle through Lakeview. Rich people always think they're above the law on weekends." The patrol car pulled away from the curb just as a midnight blue Audi RS7 glided through the intersection. The vehicle itself wasn't unusual for this area, but something about the driver caught Mercer's attention. "Hold up," Mercer straightened in his seat. "Did you see that?" "What?" Harlow asked, already turning to follow the Audi. "Black male, driving that Audi. Looked young. Doesn't fit the neighborhood profile." Harlow nodded, accelerating slightly to close the distance between their cruiser and the Audi. "Let's run the plates." The Audi maintained a perfect speed, signaled appropriately at turns, and followed every traffic rule meticulously. After 2 minutes of following, the computer returned the registration. Vehicle registered to Xavier Rhodes. No violations, no warrants. "Still seems off," Mercer muttered. "These cars cost 6 figures. Let's see what he's up to." Harlow flipped on the cruiser's lights. The Audi immediately signaled and pulled to the curb in a textbook perfect stop. As they approached, they noticed the driver's military-precise posture and calm demeanor. Neither officer could have known they were about to make the worst mistake of their careers. Colonel Xavier Rhodes had seen the patrol car in his rearview mirror for several minutes before the lights flashed on. After 12 years of military intelligence operations across 3 continents, situational awareness was second nature. He knew the drill: remain calm, move deliberately, keep hands visible. Despite his rank and clearance level, he was still a black man in America, and that meant being prepared for encounters like this. The 42-year-old Pentagon intelligence officer pulled over immediately, lowered his window, and placed both hands on the steering wheel at the 10 and 2 positions. His military ID and vehicle registration were already waiting on the dashboard, a habit born from experience. His expression remained neutral despite recognizing what this was, a textbook pretextual stop. Officer Harlow approached from the driver's side, while Mercer flanked the passenger's side, hands resting on their holsters, an unnecessary precaution that wasn't lost on Rhodes. "License and registration," Harlow demanded, flashlight beam hitting Rhodes directly in the eyes rather than the interior of the vehicle. "Good evening, officer," Rhodes replied evenly. "My license and registration are on the dashboard. May I ask why I've been stopped?" Harlow's expression hardened at the question. "You were weaving across lanes." Rhodes knew this was false. "Sir, with respect, I maintained my lane and proper speed throughout my drive." "You questioning my judgment?" Mercer interjected from the passenger window, his tone instantly hostile. "Where'd you get this car from anyway?" "I purchased it last month," Rhodes answered, maintaining his composure. "The registration confirms that." Harlow reached through the window without asking and grabbed the documents. "Step out of the vehicle." "May I ask why that's necessary? I've provided—" "I said step out of the vehicle now." Harlow's voice rose sharply. Rhodes weighed his options. As a military officer, he understood chain of command and following lawful orders, but this was rapidly escalating beyond a routine traffic stop. "I want to comply, officers, but I need to understand." Before he could finish, both car doors were yanked open simultaneously. "Get out of the car, boy," Mercer growled. "Now." Rhodes was pulled from his vehicle with unnecessary force, Mercer's fingers digging into his bicep while Harlow secured his other arm. Despite wearing civilian clothes, a simple black polo and khakis, Rhodes carried himself with military bearing, his muscular frame tensed but not resisting. "Spread your legs," Harlow commanded, kicking Rhodes's feet apart wider than necessary. "Hands behind your back." Around them, cars slowed as they passed. A young couple walking nearby stopped, the woman already recording with her phone. Rhodes could feel the high eyes on him, the assumptions being made, the story being written in witnesses' minds, another black man in trouble with police. "Officer, this is unnecessary," Rhodes stated calmly. "My identification clearly—" "Shut up," Mercer hissed, twisting Rhodes's arm higher behind his back, causing him to wince. "We'll tell you when to speak." The handcuffs closed around his wrists with a decisive click, metal biting into skin. 22 years of military service, 2 Purple Hearts, and a Distinguished Intelligence Medal, all irrelevant in this moment. "We got ourselves a nice ride tonight," Harlow sneered to his partner, loud enough for bystanders to hear. "Probably stolen." "Registration's in his name," Mercer replied, "but that doesn't mean he came by it honest." Rhodes closed his eyes briefly, centering himself. He would not give them the satisfaction of an emotional response. Instead, he filed away every word, every action, every witness. This wasn't just happening to Colonel Xavier Rhodes, citizen. It was happening to a man who had the power to make it matter. "I have the right to know why I'm being detained," Rhodes stated, his voice projecting the authority of someone accustomed to military briefing rooms. Despite the handcuffs, his posture remained ramrod straight. Harlow stepped closer, invading Rhodes's personal space. "You're being detained because I said so. That fancy car and attitude don't change who you are." "And who am I exactly?" Rhodes asked, eyes locked on Harlow's. "A troublemaker who doesn't know his place," Mercer interjected, tightening the cuffs another notch. "My place?" Rhodes' voice remained level despite the pain. "My place is serving this country, which I've done honorably for over 2 decades. Now, I'm requesting your badge numbers and a supervising officer." The request ignited Harlow's temper. "You don't make demands here." The officers shoved Rhodes toward their patrol car, making a spectacle of his detention. Passers-by slowed their vehicles, some stopping completely to witness or record the scene. The neighborhood that had been so quiet minutes before now buzzed with attention, the blue and red lights painting everyone's faces in alternating hues of judgment. "Get in the car," Harlow ordered, pushing Rhodes's head down toward the open door. The move was unnecessary, almost theatrical, performed for the growing audience rather than practical necessity. Rhodes complied silently, maintaining his dignity despite the public humiliation. As a military intelligence officer, he'd been trained to withstand far worse physical discomfort than tight handcuffs, but the emotional weight of being degraded in public struck deeper than he expected. Every pair of eyes felt like an indictment, every phone camera a reminder that his humanity was being diminished in real time. Inside the patrol car, separated from the officers by a clear partition, Rhodes focused on his breathing. He mentally cataloged everything: officer names from their badges, witness locations, exact words spoken, timestamps. His military training had taught him that information was power, and right now, gathering intelligence was his only recourse. Outside, Harlow and Mercer stood near the Audi, flashlights probing the interior through windows. Their postures had changed from the aggressive stance they'd taken with Rhodes to something more performative, making a show of investigating a vehicle they had no legal cause to search. "Think we should call for the K-9 unit?" Mercer asked loudly enough for bystanders to hear. "See if he's transporting anything?" "Probably should," Harlow replied with equal volume. "These types usually are." A young black woman who had been recording approached cautiously. "Excuse me, officers, what did that man do? He seemed to be cooperating." Harlow turned sharply. "Ma'am, step back. This is police business." "But I said step back," Harlow shouted, hand moving to his holster in a clear intimidation tactic. "Or you can join him." The woman retreated, but continued recording from a distance. Others followed her example, creating a perimeter of digital witnesses. In the patrol car, Rhodes watched this interaction through the window. He knew that officer conduct often deteriorated when challenged by civilians, especially when those civilians were minorities themselves. He'd seen the pattern both domestically and abroad. What troubled him most wasn't the officer's behavior toward him, but how quickly they threatened a completely innocent bystander. Rhodes shifted uncomfortably in the seat, the handcuffs digging into his wrists. The patrol car's interior smelled of industrial cleaner barely masking older, more concerning odors. The plastic seat was worn smooth from countless other bodies that had sat where he now waited. Mercer returned to the patrol car first, sliding into the driver's seat while Harlow continued his theatrical search of the Audi. The officer adjusted the rearview mirror to stare at Rhodes. "So, where were you headed tonight in that fancy car?" Mercer asked, his tone dripping with suspicion. "I was returning home from dinner," Rhodes answered simply. "Home, huh? And where might that be?" The question carried the clear implication that Rhodes couldn't possibly live in this affluent area. "Sir, I've provided my identification and registration. You know my address." Mercer's face hardened. "Getting smart with me?" "No, sir. Just stating facts." Harlow joined his partner in the front seat, tossing Rhodes's wallet onto the dashboard. "Nothing in the car, but something doesn't add up." The officers began scrolling through Rhodes's identification cards, pulling out his driver's license, credit cards, and finally, his military ID. Harlow held it up to the dome light. "Colonel Xavier Rhodes," he read aloud, skepticism evident in his voice. "Pentagon intelligence operations." He looked back at Rhodes with narrowed eyes. "This some kind of joke? You expect us to believe you work at the Pentagon?" "It's not a matter of belief, Officer Harlow," Rhodes replied calmly. "It's a matter of fact, and the fact is you have detained a senior military intelligence officer without cause, conducted an illegal search of my vehicle, and are currently in possession of classified identification. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Harlow's face. He studied the military ID more carefully, noting the high-level security clearance indicators. "This could be fake," Mercer insisted, but there was a new hesitation in his voice. "Call it in," Rhodes suggested. "Or better yet, I have the right to make a phone call. I suggest you allow me to exercise that right immediately." The officers exchanged glances, the first tremors of doubt beginning to crack their certainty. The atmosphere in the police station crackled with tension. Rhodes sat handcuffed to an interview room chair while Sergeant Lowell Bishop, the night supervisor, reviewed his identification with growing alarm. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across the small room's institutional green walls, highlighting the sweat beading on Bishop's forehead. "You're actually—" Bishop trailed off, looking up from the military ID to Rhodes's impassive face. "A colonel in the United States Army, currently serving as Deputy Director of Intelligence Operations at the Pentagon," Rhodes finished for him. "Yes, Sergeant, that's correct." Harlow and Mercer stood against the wall, their earlier swagger evaporated. Bishop shot them a look that promised serious consequences before turning back to Rhodes. "Colonel, I want to personally apologize for this misunderstanding," Bishop began. "This wasn't a misunderstanding, Sergeant," Rhodes interrupted, his voice calm but unyielding. "Your officers profiled me, detained me without cause, conducted an illegal search of my vehicle, and publicly humiliated me." "That's not a misunderstanding. That's misconduct." Bishop swallowed hard. "Sir, if you'll allow me to remove those handcuffs, First," Rhodes interjected, "I'd like to make my phone call." Of course," Bishop hurried to agree, nodding to Mercer to uncuff Rhodes. Mercer approached cautiously, keys fumbling in suddenly unsteady hands. As the cuffs came off, Rhodes rubbed his wrists, noting the red marks that would soon become bruises. "I'll need privacy," Rhodes stated, not a request but a command. The three officers filed out, closing the door behind them. Through the window, Rhodes could see them huddled in anxious conversation, Harlow gesticulating while Bishop's face grew progressively darker. Rhodes dialed a number from memory, one reserved for genuine emergencies. It rang only once. "Authentication code," came the crisp response. "Sierra Tango 94 Delta Echo. Colonel Rhodes reporting an Indigo situation." There was a brief pause. "Authenticated, Colonel. What's your situation and location?" "I've been illegally detained by Ridgemont Heights Police Department. Officers Vance Harlow and Kent Mercer, supervised by Sergeant Lowell Bishop. Racial profiling, illegal search and seizure, excessive force." Rhodes provided his exact location and a concise summary of events. "Understood, Colonel. Stand by." Within 5 minutes, the station phone rang. Bishop answered, his face draining of color as he listened. When he hung up, he looked through the window at Rhodes with something approaching terror. "Sir," Bishop said, re-entering the room with visible trepidation, "the Pentagon Deputy Chief of Staff is on his way with a JAG team, and the FBI Civil Rights Division has been notified." Rhodes nodded once. "I'll wait." By 1:30 a.m., the sleepy Ridgemont Heights police station had transformed into ground zero for what was rapidly becoming a federal case. The police chief, Richard Thornton, had been summoned from his bed, arriving disheveled and ashen-faced. The station's conference room now hosted an impromptu gathering of power that would have been unimaginable hours earlier. Brigadier General Eleanor Westfield, Deputy Chief of Staff for Intelligence, sat at the head of the table in full uniform despite the hour, her 4 stars catching the light with every deliberate movement. Beside her, Major Lauren Chen from the Judge Advocate General's Corps maintained a running transcript while 2 FBI agents from the Civil Rights Division observed silently from the corner. "Let me be perfectly clear," General Westfield stated, her voice carrying the weight of someone accustomed to commanding thousands.
Colonel Rhodes is not merely an officer. He oversees intelligence operations critical to national security. Tonight, your officers detained him because of the color of his skin while he was in legal possession of classified access credentials. Chief Thornton's attempts to interject were silenced by a raised hand from the general. This isn't just a civil rights violation, though it certainly is that, she continued. This is potentially a national security incident. In the hallway outside, officers Harlow and Mercer sat on a bench like schoolchildren awaiting punishment. Through the glass walls of the conference room, they could see Colonel Rhodes, now treated with evident deference by everyone present, calmly describing the evening's events. "We're screwed, aren't we?" Mercer whispered, his earlier bravado entirely evaporated. Harlow didn't answer, fixated on the FBI agents who occasionally glanced in their direction. Inside the conference room, Chief Thornton was attempting damage control. "General, I want to assure you that this incident doesn't reflect our department's values or training." "Save it," Westfield cut him off. "Your department has 7 civilian complaints for racial profiling in the past year alone. None substantiated, interestingly enough. That changes tonight." The chief blanched. Those statistics weren't publicly available. "The Pentagon has resources you can't imagine, Chief Thornton." Rhodes spoke for the first time, his voice measured. "Every complaint, every incident report, every dashboard camera that conveniently malfunctioned, we found it all in under an hour." "Colonel Rhodes has declined medical attention," Major Chen added, "but we've documented his injuries. The handcuffs were unnecessarily tight, leaving contusions on both wrists." General Westfield leaned forward. "Here's what happens next. Those officers will be suspended pending investigation. The Department of Justice will conduct a pattern and practice investigation of your entire department. Colonel Rhodes's security credentials are being reissued as we speak." Chief Thornton slumped in his chair, the full magnitude of the situation finally sinking in. "This isn't going away with an apology and a handshake," Rhodes said quietly. "This ends when there's real accountability, not just for tonight, but for the culture that made tonight possible." The Ridgemont Heights Police Department situation exploded into national headlines by morning. Major news networks led with Pentagon intelligence officer racially profiled and detained, accompanied by civilian footage of Rhodes being handcuffed beside his Audi. Social media amplified the story exponentially, the stark imagery resonating across political divides. Behind closed doors, the investigation expanded with frightening speed. The Department of Justice deployed additional resources, treating the case as both a civil rights matter and a potential compromise of classified personnel. What began as 2 officers' prejudiced assumptions had mushroomed into a full federal probe. By afternoon, journalists had uncovered Harlow and Mercer's troubling professional histories. Harlow had transferred from 2 previous departments following excessive force complaints, while Mercer had 4 unsubstantiated racial bias incidents in his file. More damning still, department records revealed a pattern of pretextual stops targeting minority drivers in affluent neighborhoods, stops that rarely resulted in citations but frequently involved vehicle searches. Chief Thornton called an emergency press conference, flanked by nervous city officials. "We take these allegations extremely seriously," he recited from prepared remarks. "The officers involved have been suspended pending a complete investigation." The assembled reporters weren't satisfied. "Chief," one called out, "is it department policy to handcuff drivers for routine traffic stops?" "Of course not," Thornton replied stiffly. "Then why was Colonel Rhodes handcuffed when no traffic violation was recorded?" The chief fumbled for words. "I can't comment on specifics during an ongoing investigation." Across town, in a secure conference room at the FBI field office, Rhodes reviewed his statement with federal prosecutors. The medical examiner had photographed his wrist bruises, which had darkened considerably, His military uniform, with its rows of commendations, stood in sharp contrast to the civilian clothes he'd worn during the incident. "Colonel," the lead prosecutor explained, "we're pursuing this under federal civil rights statutes. The officer's actions constitute deprivation of rights under color of law." Rhodes nodded. "And the department?" "The pattern of discrimination appears systemic. We've already identified 27 similar incidents in the past year alone. We're expanding the investigation to include department leadership." For Rhodes, this confirmation brought no satisfaction, only grim vindication. His personal humiliation had exposed a cancer eaten at the department from within. That evening, as Rhodes finally returned home, his secure phone rang. It was the Secretary of Defense himself. "Colonel, the President has been briefed on your situation. He wants you to know you have his full support." Rhodes thanked him quietly, the weight of what was unfolding settling on his shoulders. 4 months after that fateful traffic stop, the justice system's gears had completed their slow but inexorable turn. The federal courthouse in downtown Ridgemont Heights stood imposing against the autumn sky as Rhodes, in full-dress uniform, ascended the steps flanked by his military counsel and Department of Justice representatives. Camera flashes created a strobe effect around him, journalists shouting questions that went unanswered. Inside Courtroom 3, Judge Elaine Watkins presided over the culmination of the federal case against now former officers Harlow and Mercer. The gallery was packed with media, community activists, and high-ranking military personnel who had come in solidarity with Rhodes. "All rise," called the bailiff as Judge Watkins entered. The proceedings moved with solemn efficiency. The prosecutor outlined the case one final time: violation of civil rights under color of law, false imprisonment, filing false reports to conceal misconduct. The evidence was overwhelming. Body cameras, civilian videos, testimony from other officers, and Rhodes's own precise recounting of events. Facing potential decades in federal prison, both defendants had accepted plea agreements. Judge Watkins addressed them directly before pronouncing sentence. "Mr. Harlow, Mr. Mercer, you betrayed your oaths as law enforcement officers. You targeted Colonel Rhodes not because of any legitimate suspicion, but because of the color of his skin. In doing so, you not only violated his constitutional rights, but potentially compromised national security." She paused, looking between the two men who now stood diminished in civilian clothes, their former authority stripped away. "The plea agreements before me recommend sentences of 30 months in federal prison for each of you. I find these terms appropriate and hereby order their implementation. Additionally, you are permanently barred from serving in any law enforcement capacity." The wider impact extended far beyond these two officers. The Department of Justice investigation had uncovered systematic racial profiling throughout the department. Chief Thornton had resigned in disgrace. The city had entered into a consent decree, placing the police department under federal oversight for a minimum of 5 years. For Rhodes, the conclusion brought complicated emotions. As he exited the courthouse, a reporter called out, "Colonel, do you feel justice was served today?" Rhodes paused thoughtfully before responding. "Justice isn't a single verdict or sentence. It's a commitment to fairness that requires constant vigilance. What happened to me happens to countless Americans who don't have the Pentagon behind them. Today's outcome is important, but true justice means building systems where these incidents don't happen in the first place." That evening, Rhodes received notice of his promotion to Brigadier General, along with a new assignment: Special Advisor to the Department of Justice's Police Reform Initiative. His personal ordeal had transformed into a platform for meaningful change, turning humiliation into purpose, injustice into reform. Sometimes, he reflected, power must be wrongly taken before it can be rightly used. 2 years after the incident that changed his life trajectory, Brigadier General Xavier Rhodes, stood at the podium addressing the graduating class of the newly reformed Ridgemont Heights Police Academy. The department, rebuilt from the ground up following the federal investigation, had become an unexpected model for reform. "Your badges represent a promise," Rhodes told the diverse group of cadets before him. "Not a promise of power, but a promise of service. Not immunity from accountability, but a commitment to it." In the front row sat Jasmine Willis, the young woman who had courageously filmed the incident that night. Now, she was part of the civilian oversight board that reviewed police conduct. Beside her sat former Sergeant Bishop, who had cooperated with investigators and now served as the department's ethics training coordinator. The changes stemming from Rhodes's case had rippled outward in unexpected ways. His testimony before Congress had helped shape new federal legislation on police accountability. The military had implemented enhanced protocols for supporting service members who experienced discrimination. Most importantly, communities across the country had used Ridgemont Heights as a case study in transformation. "The measure of justice," Rhodes concluded, "isn't what happens after wrongdoing, but what we build to prevent it. Each of you represents not just a badge, but a bridge between law and equality, between authority and humanity." As the cadets rose in standing ovation, Rhodes reflected on the journey from humiliation to healing. The system that had failed him hadn't been destroyed, it had been transformed, and in that transformation lay the truest form of justice, not retribution, but renewal.